Today's case is one of those that has baffled everyone for years. It's a story that defies all logic, a puzzle with so many missing pieces that it's hard to know where to even begin. We're talking about a 9-year-old girl, a happy, shy, well loved little girl who, on a stormy Valentine's night, packed her favorite book bag, walked out of her family home, and just vanished into the rain. The most haunting part? She wasn't running away from anything. She had a loving family, she was a good student, she was scared of the dark. So why did she leave?
Asia Degree
disappearance case.
Search for Asia Degree.
Have new information in the search for Asia Degree.
Asia Degree disappears.
Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and on this channel we dive deep into true crime. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, please join the fam and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and share it around if you can. Taking 2 seconds to do that really helps out the channel and it means so much to me. So to everyone that just did it, thank you so much. Also, if you want to get to know me more, suggest cases directly to me and just hang out, become a channel member by hitting the join button down below. Let's get into the heartbreaking and deeply confusing story of Asia Degree. Asia Jaquilla Degree was born on August 5th, 1990 in North Carolina to her parents Harold and Aquilla Degree. Her parents had a really sweet love story. They got married on Valentine's Day in 1988, and then a year later their son O'Brien was born, and then little Asia came along. The Degrees were a solid, hardworking, church-going family. They lived in a modest home on Oakcrest Drive in a pretty rural part of Cleveland County, just outside the city of Shelby. Harold worked as a dock loader at PPG Industries, usually on the late shift, and Aquilla worked for a piano parts manufacturer. They were a very close-knit family with lots of extended relatives living just around the corner. I believe Asia's grandmother, Joanne Jackson, and Aunt Alicia Degree lived across the street and shared responsibility keeping the siblings when school was out for the day. Harold and Aquilla raised their kids with strong Christian values. The whole family was at Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church every Sunday without fail. They were what you might call protective parents, but in a good way. This was the late 90s, the dawn of the internet age, and they were very wary of the dangers online. To shield their kids, they made the decision not to have a computer in their home. Life for Asia and O'Brien revolved around 3 things: school, church, and family. It was a simple, safe, and loving world that their parents had built for them. Asia was a 4th grader at Falston Elementary School, and by all accounts, she was a great student. She was quiet and a bit shy, but she had a perfect attendance record and was known for being super intelligent with honor roll status. She loved math and science, but her real passion was basketball. After school, Asia and O'Brien were expected to do their homework pretty quickly, as their parents insisted on academic excellence and would check if their homework was done before letting them play. Asia was a star point guard in Pee Wee basketball. Her team was the Falston Bulldogs. She was this shy, cautious little girl who was also a fierce competitor on the court. Her parents attended all games, actively cheering the siblings on. And during the week, Asia's days were filled with school and sports practice. Her weekends were spent at ball games and church, and this was the same church she went to since she was born. The siblings were pretty responsible too. They had their own house key and would let themselves in after coming home from school, getting their homework done and chores done before their mom got home from work. Crazy to think kids at the age of 10 were coming home by themselves and letting themselves in the home too. Because when I was between the ages of 6 and 10, I would actually come home by myself on a bus, and I lived in India during that time. So coming home by myself in India under the age of 10 just seems wild now. I would be let into my house by a neighbor because my brothers finished school after I did. I would not let my kids come home alone at that age. So it's kind of crazy. But the 90s, early 2000s were such a different time, and honestly, some parents, have no other options. But that kind of lets you in on how Asia and O'Brien were. They were responsible and kind of knew what the right and wrong things were. Asia was also described as being very cautious. She was apparently terrified of dogs and intensely afraid of the dark. This is a key detail that just makes her disappearance all the more baffling. This was not a rebellious kid. She was a homebody who was scared of thunderstorms. The community they lived in just outside Shelby was rural. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. The city of Shelby itself actually had a pretty high crime rate for a town of its size, but still the areas the Degrees lived in was a quiet area and their life was very sheltered and protected. They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have a computer, like I said, so this meant that when Aisha disappeared, there was also no digital trail to follow. No emails, no chat logs, nothing. This case was going to have to be solved the old-fashioned way. The weekend before Aisha vanished was a long one. School was out on February 11th, 2000, so Aisha and O'Brien spent the day with their aunt while their parents worked. On Saturday, February 12th, was the big championship basketball game for Aisha's team. It was their first loss of the entire season, and to make it worse, Aisha fouled out of the game. Her parents said she was pretty upset and cried with her teammates, but like most kids, she seemed to bounce back pretty quickly. Later that night, she and O'Brien went to a big family sleepover at their cousin's house. It sounded like a totally normal, fun-filled family weekend. On Sunday, February 13th, Aisha and O'Brien go to church with their aunt, their grandmother, and their cousins, where they met up with the rest of the family, including Aquila and Harold. They then had lunch at their aunt's house and went home. That evening, everything seemed completely normal, but O'Brien noticed that Aisha wasn't really happy. So he asked her, what was wrong? And she said she just couldn't believe that her team lost the game. She seemed to blame herself for the loss. The kids watched some TV, and around 6:30 p.m. Aisha took a nap on the couch, probably because she didn't sleep well at the sleepover the night before with her cousins. Harold may have gone to work at about 4 p.m. and returned at 11:30 p.m. And I'm saying may because this isn't exactly confirmed. It's said that he did stop by a candy store at 11:30 p.m. at night to buy Valentine's candy for the next day, but some accounts say that he left home to buy this candy, and then some say that he actually bought the candy on his way home from work. At 8:30 p.m., Aisha is woken up by a loud noise. A car accident nearby knocked out the power in the whole neighborhood, so Aquila lights some candles and sends the kids to bed by 9 p.m., leaving a candle alight in their room. Aisha was last seen by her brother wearing a white nightgown with red trim and a teddy bear on the front. The lights came back on at around 12:30 a.m. on February 14th, so Aquila then blows out all of the candles but left the one in the kids' room on, and then she turned off the kerosene heater and headed to bed. Harold returns home at around this time and checks on the kids at 12:30 a.m., and by 2:30 a.m. he heads to bed, and before he does, he goes to check on the kids once again and saw them both fast asleep in bed, sleeping soundly. But sometime after that, after 2:30 a.m., O'Brien, who was 10 at the time, remembers hearing Aisha get up to go to the bathroom, and then he later heard her bed squeak. He just assumed she was rolling over or adjusting her blankets, and then he fell back asleep. He didn't think anything of it. But it is now believed that this was the moment that 9-year-old Aisha Degree got out of bed. She grabbed a book bag that she had apparently packed earlier, which contained a change of clothes and her favorite Tweety bird purse. Then she unlocked the front door, stepped out into the dark, stormy night, and started walking. According to Aquila, a key was not required to open the door from the inside, as the door would stay locked even after it was opened from the inside. So I'm guessing Aisha could just open the door from the inside using a latch, and then as she shut it, the door would stay locked.
I just believe she walked out one of these doors on her own free will. But after that, once she walked down that road, somebody picked her up.
Between 3:45 a.m. and 4:15 a.m., at least 2 different drivers saw a small figure walking along Highway 18. It was a miserable, cold, windy night pouring with rain. A truck driver named Roy Blanton was out with his son and saw what he described as a small figure in light-colored clothing. He thought maybe it was a woman who had a fight with her partner and was just walking off. He didn't stop, but he did get on his CB radio to alert the other truckers. Another driver, Jeff Roop, saw her too. He said he was so shocked at the sight that he turned around 3 times and actually drove past her to get a good look. He described a small girl wearing a white dress or a big t-shirt, white tennis shoes, and her hair was in pigtails. She was carrying a book bag and looked like she knew exactly where she was going. She never looked up at him. However, the 3rd time Jeff drove past this little girl, as he got closer and rolled down the window, maybe she got scared. I mean, after all, a truck following you can be quite intimidating. He saw her suddenly run off the side of the road and into a dark wooded area. She just disappeared into the trees, and that was it. That was the last time anyone ever saw what could have been Aisha Degree. The next morning, February 14th, 2000, was Harold and Aquila's 12th wedding anniversary. Aquila woke up at around 5:45 a.m. to get the children ready for school. At 6:30 a.m., she began running a bath for the kids and then went to wake them up. The children would normally bathe at night, but due to the power outage the night prior, they skipped their baths and they had to take one before school. She walked into the kids' bedroom and found O'Brien still in his bed, but Aisha's bed was empty. She asked O'Brien where Aisha was, but he hadn't seen her. Aisha's bed looked unmade, like she had slept in it. Aquila searched the entire house and the cars, but there was no sign of her. In a complete panic, she woke up Harold and then called Harold's mother, Joanne, who lived across the road, and asked if Aisha was there. She wasn't. Aquila went up and down the street screaming Aisha's name and asked anyone awake if they had seen her. At 6:39 a.m., just as the sun was starting to rise, a frantic Harold called 911 to report his 9-year-old daughter missing. Police were there within 10 minutes. The community response was immediate and massive. By 7 a.m., every cop in the county was there, and by 8 a.m., hundreds of volunteers had gathered, ready to search. There was no sign of forced entry into the home and no evidence of a crime scene. So an air search with infrared equipment on a spotter plane was sent out. Police sent out cadaver dogs. Rescue professionals volunteered. A helicopter was sent out. Aisha's family and friends in the community all set out looking for the missing little girl for hours. The FBI even got involved that quickly, and Aisha's dental records and her hair sample was collected. Later that day and the next day, the two truckers, Jeff and Roy, they came forward with their sightings about this little girl alone on the road. They checked with her parents if anything was missing from the home, and after checking, her parents noticed Aisha's favorite pair of jeans, a red vest, black shoes, her Tweety Bird purse, a pair of overalls, and her book bag that she would take to school were all missing. On Tuesday, February 15th, 2000, searchers found the first clues in a shed at Turner's Upholstery, a local business about 1.5 miles from the Degree home, right in the direction she was allegedly seen walking. But after that, the trail went cold. Despite an exhaustive 7-day search involving dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of people, nothing else was found. On February 23rd, 2000, the official ground search was called off. The investigation that followed involved local police, the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and the FBI. They interviewed Aisha's classmates who said Aisha had some money in her purse that she showed them, but her parents didn't actually know where that money came from. Investigators were stumped from the start. In November 2000, an inmate at the local jail and a former classmate of Aquila's named Baron Ramsey had a story to tell. He said that he and another man were driving back to Shelby after buying some drugs on the night that Aisha disappeared, and they hit Aisha, who was crossing the road. The friend put Aisha into the back of the truck and dropped Baron back home. The friend took Aisha in the car and dumped her body at Moss Lake. Now, this was apparently investigated and no evidence of a hit and run was ever found, blood, skid marks, paint chips, etc. And Moss Lake was also searched twice by divers and found nothing. So this was believed to have been a false confession. They believed Baron was trying to get a plea deal for the charge of bank robbery he was currently facing at the time and what he was in jail for. For 1.5 years, there was nothing. Then 18 months later, on August 3rd, 2001, a construction worker named Terry Fleming was clearing land for a new development along Highway 18 in Burke County. A family was building a new home and they had this long driveway and they needed the entire area to be cleared out. This was about 26 miles north of Shelby in the opposite direction Aisha was last seen walking. Buried under some trees, he found a black book bag, double wrapped in black plastic trash bags. This was odd, as although he had seen multiple items when he cleared land in the past, this stood out to him. This was a huge break, but it just created more questions. The case remained cold for many more years. In 2015, the FBI announced they were re-examining the case, and in a press conference on May 25th, 2016, they announced they had a new potential lead. A witness had allegedly come forward claiming they may have seen Aisha getting into a distinctive car. This led the FBI to release a public appeal for information about an early 1970s Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird, possibly dark green with rust around the wheel wells. Despite these efforts, the trail went cold again until shocking new leads began to emerge. Okay, so because there's so much information in this case, everything can get kind of jumbled and confusing. So How I want to talk about it is let's talk about the evidence first, and then let's talk about the suspects and then get into theories of what could have happened to Aisha. So let's really break down the evidence here because the few items that were found are both so puzzling and deeply disturbing, and the potential suspects that have emerged over the years are just as complex. So going back to the first items that were found on February 15th, 2000 in that shed at Turner's Upholstery. I believe the owner of the actual land was someone named Charles Turner, but the two people that were actually running Turner's Upholstery at the time were Raleigh and Debbie, mother and daughter. So they were asked to search their property for any signs of Aisha, and at the back of their property, they had this old storage shed which usually had old furniture and a tractor in it. So they searched inside the shed, and it was interesting. A searcher found a red candy wrapper outside the shed and a photo of a young black girl. So they showed Raleigh and Debbie these, and that's when these women handed over the trash they had found inside the shed at an earlier time. They found some of Aisha's favorite candy wrappers, cinnamon disc candies, a white Olympics pencil, a green marker, and a yellow hair bow with a bear on it. The next day, the police showed Aquila and Harold the items they found in the shed. Her mother, Aquila, immediately recognized the hair bow as belonging to her daughter. This proved that she was likely in that shed, perhaps seeking shelter from the storm, but also that photograph of another young black girl who was around the same age as Aisha. They showed this photo to Aquila and Harold, and they did not recognize this girl. Weirdly, though, initially, Raleigh and Debbie only showed this photo to the police, and since they did not recognize this girl, they didn't show the other items like the hair bow and the candy wrappers to the police. And then later, when a search volunteer asked about the candy wrappers, that's when they showed the other items found in the shed to the police. Hope that makes sense. It was all really odd. But to this day, that young girl in the photograph has never been identified, and her connection to the case, if any, is a total mystery. Was she another victim, a friend, or was it just a random, unrelated item that had been in the shed for years? Nobody knows. The storage shed, however, did not have a lock on it, so anyone could access it. When cadaver dogs searched the area, they also did not pick up Aisha's scent. It was also weird, but this doesn't mean she wasn't there. The heat, the humidity could have affected her scent. The cadaver dogs could have been badly trained, or this case just fell into the 5% of cases that cadaver dogs fail in. You know, they only have a 95% accuracy rate. Then you have the book bag discovered on August 3rd, 2001, 18 months later. This is the most significant and perplexing piece of evidence ever found. Construction worker Terry found it buried, but what's crucial is that it was double wrapped in black trash bags. This wasn't just discarded, it was deliberately concealed. The careful wrapping suggests someone was trying to preserve its contents or hide it from the elements. When Terry got a hold of the book bag, he looked inside. He found it strange because inside was a bizarre mix of the familiar and the foreign. Aisha's name and number was inside the bag. Not all of the items found in the bag have been fully released, but some notable contents were clothing like her favorite jeans with a red stripe, a long-sleeved white nylon shirt, black overalls with a Tweety bird on it, a red vest with black trim, a black and white long-sleeve shirt, and her basketball uniform. It also had her lime green Tweety bird purse, black shoes, a house key, Aisha's wallet, and 3 family photos. So Terry took the book bag home and told his wife about his discovery. His wife was shocked because she knew the name of the missing girl from the news. They then contacted the police. But there were also 2 items found in the bag that her parents insisted did not belong to her and that they had never seen before. The first was a copy of the Dr. Seuss book McElliot's Pool, and it was later confirmed that this book had been checked out from the library at Aisha's elementary school. The second was a concert t-shirt for the band New Kids on the Block. Aisha wasn't a fan of the band, and her parents had no idea where this shirt had come from. Also, technically, Aisha was too young to be a fan of them, so who put these things in her bag? Were they planted there by her abductor to throw police off the scent, or were they gifts from a secret friend who might have been involved in luring her out of the house? This is one of the biggest question marks in the entire case. The book bag was also found in Burke County while Aisha lived in Cleveland County, about 45 minutes away from each other. It would have taken her 11 to 14 hours to walk there. Also, Aisha was seen walking south, but the book bag was discovered up north. If she did walk the entire way, someone somewhere would have seen her along the way. If she hitched a ride, that would have been really strange for someone to give a 9-year-old a ride, but maybe someone would have come forward if they didn't have anything to do with her disappearance. She would have also needed food, water, rest, the bathroom. It just doesn't make sense. Also, the location where it was found, it was just a bunch of trees and brush. The driveway part was not there before, so did someone just discard it from a car, from the road nearby? But the double wrapped in plastic garbage bags part, is what makes it seem intentionally hidden, right? The forensic analysis of the contents of the bag was never released to the public. So someone tipped police that they remember seeing someone that looked like Aisha getting into a dark green 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or possibly a Ford Thunderbird with rust around the wheel wells. So now this tip was actually given to the police closer to the time that Aisha actually went missing, but it was overlooked by the police and only noticed once the investigation was looked into again in 2015 and 2016. It was also reported that there were perhaps 2 occupants in the car. So did Aisha get into this car willingly? The details of the witness account hasn't actually been released. And if this is true, was she kidnapped or did she know the people in the car? So let's talk about the suspects now. For decades, there were actually no official suspects, but that changed recently. And the leads are pretty wild. So we have the Dedmon family. This is a very recent development taking place just last year in September 2024. So the Dedmon family had parents Roy Lee and Connie Dedmon. They had 3 daughters, Lizzie, Sarah, and Annalee. The entire recent investigation hinges on a tip that came to the Cleveland County Sheriff Office on September 18th, 2024. A man named Thad Melentine came forward with a story from nearly 2 decades prior. Thad stated that during the mid-2000s, when he was in his 20s, he would occasionally socialize and attend house parties with the Dedmon sisters, specifically Lizzie and Sarah. He recalled one particular party where he witnessed a very emotional scene. According to Thad, he saw Lizzie, who was extremely intoxicated, become distraught, sobbing and bawling. Thad told police he heard Lizzie make several clear statements admitting to killing Aisha Degree. He specifically quoted her as saying, "I killed Aisha Degree." Thad further stated that immediately after Lizzie made this confession, her sister Sarah came over to her, becoming very stern and angry, and told Lizzie to shut the fuck up as she grabbed her head. He noticed that Sarah's aggressive reaction seemed out of character for her and made the moment stand out even more in his head. To verify his story, investigators had Thad take a polygraph test, which he passed, supporting the credibility of his statement. This tip was deemed strong enough to serve as the primary basis for obtaining search warrants. Thad's tip directly led investigators to seek and execute search warrants for the iCloud accounts of the Dedmon family members. The warrants were publicly released on Tuesday, February 18th, 2025, revealing a series of panicked text messages that painted a picture of a family in crisis. So the text messages exchanged between the sisters, Lizzie, Sarah, and Annalee, and other family members showed their reaction to the renewed investigation into the disappearance of Aisha Degree. The texts were filled with fear and shock. Sarah texted, "Dad is probably going to be a huge suspect," and "This is a nightmare. I'm shaking and can't walk now either." Lizzie expressed her own deep anxiety, texting her ex-husband, Kelly Foster, "This is going to get nothing but worse, and there is no way this is going to be okay." They focused on a shirt. Sarah texted Lizzie, "They think it's our shirt. It's not her shirt." This is a potentially significant detail as it could be a reference to the unrecognized New Kids on the Block t-shirt found in Aisha's book bag. The family quickly sought legal counsel. Annalee texted Lizzie, "I'm at the lawyer's office," and advised her we should all not talk to them without representation. In a particularly revealing message to her ex-husband, Lizzie wrote, "I feel so horrible, so horrible. I don't know what to do. I caused this." Lizzie also texted her sister Sarah about a conversation with her family attorney, David Teddy, stating, "The theory is I did it. Accident. Covered it up." The investigation involved direct contact with the family, so on September 28th, 2024, Lieutenant Daniel Howell of the Cleveland County's Sheriff's Office approached Lizzie Dedmon in Texas, but she refused to speak with him. This refusal prompted more anxious texts between the sisters about whether they should cooperate or just listen to their father. On February 10th, 2025, Lizzie was approached again, and this time she agreed to take a polygraph test. While the full results weren't released, the warrant states that on the crucial question of whether she was concealing information about the case, her response was found to be deceptive. In an interview with investigators, Lizzie made an ambiguous but pretty chilling statement about her father, Roy Dedmon, saying, "If my dad did it, he did it, but I had nothing to do with it." The combination of a credible eyewitness tip, a panicked series of family text messages referencing key details about the case, a deceptive polygraph result, and ambiguous statements has placed the Dedmon family at the absolute center of the investigation into what happened to Aisha Degree, and it blew everyone's mind. Police looked into Harold and Aquila Degree. It's an uncomfortable but necessary part of any investigation like this to look at the parents. So in the early days, and even now in some online forums, there has been some speculation about Harold and Aquila's potential involvement. The arguments for this theory are honestly purely circumstantial. The house was locked with no signs of forced entry. How did a 9-year-old get out without anyone hearing? Was she coached? The circumstances are just so strange. However, evidence against them being involved is pretty overwhelming, despite Harold's 911 call seeming odd to people, because Harold reportedly said, "I would like to report a child missing," and claimed a neighbor said she went down the road. This information on the neighbor and the reported sighting has never been prodded into. So people also claimed that Harold sounded like he was distancing himself from Aisha using the term "a child missing." Aquila and Harold have cooperated fully with law enforcement from day one, submitting to, countless interviews and polygraph tests, which they reportedly passed. There is absolutely no motive, and the Degrees were a loving, stable family with no history of abuse or financial trouble, and most importantly, their actions for the past 25 years speak volumes. I mean, if you watch interviews that they have done, it just doesn't look like they're involved. It looks like they're still hurting, as any parent would be.
To my dad, other people might not say it. I'm going to apologize to for what you had to endure for these 25 years of them saying that you had something to do with my sister's disappearance. I know the love you have for her, and I know the love you have for me and my mama, and I don't care what nobody say. I know you had nothing to do with this, and I stand on that.
Today, Harold and Aquila are still married. They still live in the same house on Oakcrest Drive, a home that has become probably a painful shrine to their missing daughter. They have never changed the locks. They've left Aisha's room, untouched. A time capsule from the year 2000, waiting for a little girl who never came home. They are still active in their church and are held up by their faith and their community. And every single year on February 14th, they lead a heartbreaking walk for Aisha. They gather with family, friends, and supporters and walk the 1.5 miles from their home to the spot on Highway 18 where she was last seen. They carry signs, they share stories, and they pray for answers. Their pain is as raw today as it was in 2000. Harold said, "I'm not putting a headstone up for my daughter. I'm holding on to hope that she'll come home." Their life has been a quarter century of suspended grief, a public display of a private hell. To suggest that they were involved seems to ignore the mountain of evidence of their suffering and their unwavering fight to find their child. Aquila has said in interviews that she still maintains contact with some of Aisha's friends, and now to see them, living lives, having children, getting married, it's just heartbreaking for her because she realizes how much she has missed out on. She's missed out on 25 years. She's missed out on Aisha's entire life. But she was grateful to have those 9 with her. What could have been done differently? It's so easy to give our thoughts 2 decades later, over 2 decades later. The drivers who saw a little girl on the side of the road that night have probably been tortured by what ifs ever since. In today's world, I think almost anyone would stop and call 911 immediately. But back in 2000, maybe it wasn't as automatic. Still, a child walking alone in a storm at 4 a.m. is a massive red flag. Why weren't the police called? Better yet, why didn't someone make an active approach to stop her until police could arrive? The impact on the Degree family is just unimaginable. For 25 years, Harold and Aquila have lived in a state of not knowing, is their daughter alive? Did she suffer? They have never, ever given up hope, and their strength is honestly incredible. Their family, once so whole and happy, was shattered by one night. with no answers still. This case is a heartbreaking reminder of how quickly a life can change. Aisha came from this loving, happy, close family, and now her parents and her brother will have to live the rest of their lives without her, without answers, unless we have a miracle. All because of one stormy night. What's wild to me is how a child so cautious could end up in a situation so dangerous. Was she tricked? Did she make a childish mistake that had the worst possible consequences? The t-shirt in her bag is still a complete mystery. Were they gifts from a secret friend, or were they planted in the bag after her disappearance? It's all so confusing. Aisha would be in her 30s today. She might have become a scientist or a basketball coach or an illustrator like she dreamed. Instead, she remains frozen in time. A 9-year-old girl whose smiling school picture has become the face of one of America's most enduring mysteries. In 2020, on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, the FBI released an updated age-progressed photo of what Aisha might look like as an adult. They also announced a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for her disappearance. So let's talk about some theories of what happened to her, because I really went down a big-ass rabbit hole trying to see if anyone's theories make sense. The theories are all over the place, and honestly, none of them seem to fit perfectly. So first, we have the runaway theory. This is the simplest theory, but it's also the one that makes the least sense. Aisha packed a bag, which suggests she planned to leave. Maybe the lost basketball game or some other unknown childhood issue upset her more than anyone realized. Maybe she was trying to emulate the characters in the book The Whipping Boy, a book they were reading at school. But to walk out into a storm, a girl who was scared of the dark, and where would she have been going? On foot at 4 a.m. Was this her first time leaving home, or had she done this before without being noticed? It just doesn't add up with what we know about her personality. Any kid who even maybe would think about it, when they open the door and then they see the dark, and then, or even if they started walking and then they're like, oh shit, I'm not going to do this anymore. That's like what a normal kid would do. So it just doesn't make sense. The next theory is that she was groomed and lured. This is a theory that has gained more traction over the years. And even though the family didn't have a computer, it's possible she was groomed by someone in her community, someone from church, a neighbor, or even a family friend. Maybe this person convinced her to pack a bag and meet them somewhere, promising something like a birthday surprise since her parents' anniversary was coming up and Valentine's Day was the next day. Maybe someone knew she was sad about the basketball loss and was trying to make her happy, enticing her in that way. This could explain why she left willingly. How did she have that money in her purse? Did someone give her that money and promised her more? But if she was meeting someone, why was she seen walking alone for so long on the highway? If she was really groomed by someone, this person would have really planned well, because to say, no, you walk quite a bit, like 10, 15 minutes in the dark until you meet me at this location so that Aisha wouldn't be seen with anyone, it's kind of like very planned. And yeah, it just doesn't, I don't know. What do you guys think about that theory? The next theory is she was abducted, and this is perhaps the most terrifying and plausible theory. Aisha left her home for some unknown reason. Maybe she was just going for a walk. Maybe she went to meet someone. While walking alone along the dark highway, a predator saw an opportunity. They pulled over, forced her into their car, and she was never seen again. The driver who saw her run into the woods might have been the person who spooked her, or he might have been the person she was running from. It seems like Jeff was kind of cleared, but I couldn't find any more information on him, I believe that Raleigh and Deborah's shed is close to this area too, where she was seen running off into. So did Aisha seek shelter from this person here? This theory would explain how her backpack ended up 26 miles away. The abductor likely drove north and dumped the bag to get rid of evidence. I've seen some speculations online that the perpetrator was actually someone who was active in the search for Aisha. They were kept up to date and informed of the evidence found, and therefore they took the book bag and dumped it north to confuse the police trail. Another question I have is, was Aisha's house key still at home? So I know that they found a house key in her bag, I believe, but it was never confirmed if it was actually her house key or if it was just a key. So if she took her house key with her and the key found in her bag was actually her house key, wouldn't that indicate she planned to return home? Also, what if she lost her house key? Or what if it was stolen from her and duplicated or something like that? Someone in the community from her church, basketball matches, or school could have stolen it and duplicated it, or just stolen it with bad intentions, and therefore there would have been no sign of forced entry into the home. Is that too wild of a theory? Then there's the Dedmon family and all those text messages. The New Kids on the Block shirt does make sense to have belonged to an older girl, like the age the Dedmon sisters would have been in 2000. However, the extensive searches of the Dedmon properties produced no evidence and no charges have been filed. The Dedmon family has denied any involvement in Aisha's disappearance, and it's a promising lead, but so far it hasn't led to a breakthrough. The theory with the Dedmon family, I believe, is that Lizzie or Sarah or someone, the father, would have been driving that night and killed Aisha in a hit and run. That's all just a theory and speculation. I don't believe there's any evidence that has anything to do with that. But the text message that says it was an accident and it was covered up is kind of what lends to that theory. The case of Aisha Degree is very, very upsetting. And the amount of times I got emotional researching this case, just trying to put yourself in that little girl's shoes. What was she thinking? What was she doing? What happened to her? You know, it's wild that humans can just disappear. And to know that a vulnerable little girl, you know, most likely met with foul play, is just so heartbreaking to think, you know, she didn't plan this. She didn't know perhaps that this was even a possibility, you know, and one day everything's fine and she's playing basketball and the next day she vanished. I mean, I don't believe she just fell in some ditch. They've done extensive searches. It's pretty clear that someone is involved, and for 25 years plus, they've gotten away with it. And this poor girl and her poor family just have to suffer. It's truly heartbreaking. And as a parent, I think it hits even deeper. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, guys. What do you think happened to Aisha? Which theory makes the most sense to you, or do you have your own theory? If you do join, or if you're already on Discord, get to chatting on there of what you think happened to Aisha Degree. Which theory makes the most sense to you? It's devastating, and I just hope that one day her family gets the answers they so deserve. I'll see you in the comments, guys, and I will see you again in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.